Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be continuing my little mini-series about artwork inspired by Dante and the Divine Comedy. I originally had planned this, as I mentioned in some community posts in prior videos, just like one giant master post. It's based on a blog post which I originally wrote on the 28th of July 2021, and it spotlighted 7 artists who had illustrated the Divine Comedy over the centuries with 10 like example illustrations by each of these artists, and as well as like the introductory image. But I felt like it would be a much better idea, and obviously like using a lot less memory and such, and taking way less time to like just split it up by artists. So I'm going to be starting with my favorite of the artists, which I'm aware of, Bartolomeo Pinelli, and also I'm doing this as spotlight on him alone and not just like grouped with everyone else, because at the time I originally wrote the post, I only, knew his Inferno illustrations in addition to like one of Canto 2 of Purgatory. And so since then I've found an awesome repository like featuring all of his artwork from all 3 canticles, which is like totally awesome. And so now I can give a more like balanced showcase of him. Obviously not going to be showing like every single thing he did. It's just like basically a relatively small like taste. And so I'll obviously put a link down below if you want to check it out. So anyway, let's just get down with it. Bartolomeo Pinelli did 145 prints during the 1820s, according to the repository I found. He completed this like great masterwork in of March of 1826. Though Gustave Doré's art is like way more famous and evocative, that's probably the artist like pretty much everyone thinks of when they think about Dante. And I did buy the Longfellow translation just because it had Doré's famous woodcuts. I really like Pinelli's illustrations since they're so cute and charming. I know it's kind of weird to say like, oh, drawings of like hell and demons and stuff is cute and charming, but I'm very macabre, and he just had this like really cute, sweet, simple style you'll see throughout the video. And so, but it's a shame they're not better known and more widely available. Sometimes simpler art just speaks more powerfully or personally than detailed, sophisticated art. And here you're seeing the frontispiece of the entire Divine Comedy illustrated by Pinelli. Obviously, I presume that's Pinelli. I'm standing at the left, and look, obviously a statue of Dante is in the middle, and there's some like dogs down at the other side, and this is the frontispiece of Inferno, basically like Dante and Virgil looking at a conference of demons, which is, like, I just absolutely love his artwork. I'm sorry if I'm sounding like a broken record and rambling already. I just absolutely love his artwork. And this is obviously the illustration of the first canto of Inferno, and the famous opening lines. Midway life's journey, I became aware that I had strayed into a dark forest, and the right path appeared not anywhere. Ah, tongue cannot describe how it oppressed, this wood so harsh, dismal, and wild, but fear, the thought of it strikes now into my breast. So bitter is it, death is scarce bitterer, but for the good it was my hap to find. I speak of the other things that I saw there. I cannot remember well in my mind how I came thither, so was I immersed in sleep when the true way I left behind. And if you saw my video in September 2021, I do know all 136 lines of Canto 1 of Inferno in the original medieval Florentine Tuscan, and I still know it by heart all these many months and over a year now later. And now this is continuing with Canto 1 of Inferno, when like Dante finds Virgil like at the most like happy moment, because like he's like, help me, sage. Vedi la bestia per cui io mi volsi, aiutami da lei, famoso saggio, che la mi fa tremare le veni e I polsi. And he's like basically like begging him to save him from the beast who's making his like veins and pulses tremble. And Virgil says like, no dude, you'll have to go another way. This beast like impedes anyone who tries to cross her, and like many animals go to mate with her, and like she like kills them all, and like you have to wait until this like Veltro greyhound comes to save everybody. This is Canto 2 of Inferno, where Beatrice is summoning Virgil. I've just about I have gotten up to that point. I need to like seriously get back to memorizing it. I would guess like a little bit over halfway through of Canto 2, and she basically tells him, look, I have a friend and I'm really worried about him. He's like impeded on the way. I'm worried I might be a little bit too late to save him. Like my friend is no friend of fortune. Like just like go and like move him with your like wonderful words. And when I'm in front of my Lord, I will speak of you many times, like, oh, you're so wonderful, you can do this, because like the world preserves your fame, and your fame will be preserved as long as world there is. And then she goes on to talk to Virgil, and then Virgil tells Dante the story about how Beatrice had a conference with the Virgin Mary and Saint Lucia, and they like 3 women worked together to hatch a plan to save this wayward soul. And I really, really like this. Obviously, like, the Middle Ages was a very male-centric world, like, however you slice it, even though like women weren't like, like 100% like complete like peasants and untouchables like some people might like stereotype it as. But I just really, really like it. In such a male-dominated society, like Dante has this idea of like a woman saving him, and not just like one woman like being his like guide through paradise, but like 3 women in the beginning like getting together to save him, even if like Virgil is like the guide throughout hell and purgatory. Like it was all set in motion by 3 women, so that's just awesome. Now this is the famous opening the gates to hell in Canto 3 of Inferno, which is famously inscribed. Through me is the way to the city of woe. Through me the way to the eternal pain. Through me the way among the lost below. Righteousness did my Maker on high constrain. Me did divine authority uprear. Me to supreme wisdom and primal love sustain. Before I was, no things created were, save the eternal, and I eternal abide. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. And now we see the neutrals in Ante Inferno. This is a very, very famous episode, and I did a previous video. This has like inspired one of the most famous, like without doubt, like fake Dante quote. Even I fell for this and like put it in 2 of my books, and it just like really bugged my cross so much. So I decided I'm going to be doing like second editions, like rooting that quote out and replacing it with something that like speaks in a not exact sentiment, but just like something like representing Dante's work, because I just didn't like the idea, even if I like put in a future book like, oh, this guy was like fooled by a fake quote and he tells his daughter about vetting sources. No, I'm just going to completely change it to begin with, but obviously that's a subject for another thing. And like here we're seeing like the boat to hell with Charon, and like Dante and Virgil are in the back of it. He's just, like Dante is so like terrified at this like foretaste of hell. He faints when they get out of the boat. Like a lot of people, I mean, I know I've mentioned this in many videos and blog posts. Some people think like he just faints or passes out because he like can't be arsed to like write about it, or he can't figure out what to write, or he's just like a cop out or laziness or whatever. But many people like believe for like various reasons based on like how he describes so vividly and realistically like fainting and like almost fainting and coming back to himself in many of his works, not just the Commedia, that he might have had like a condition like epilepsy or something similar in real life, because it's just like you can't just fake that. Like, so yeah, he does faint when he's overcome by a lot of like stress and or extreme emotions, which would also fit very well with like a condition like epilepsy or something similar. Now here we see Canto 4 of Inferno with Limbo with righteous so-called pagans. I don't really like that word, but that was obviously what Dante used in his time, and this is where he's invited to join the noble school. Like in addition to Virgil, there's also Homer, Horace, Lucan, and Ovid. And it's like, Dante had really only one major work to his name at this point, or at least at the point when the poem is set in the year 1300. And so he's got a lot of like chutzpah to like say, oh, I'm so great, and these like great poets from ancient Greece and Rome love and admire and respect me so much they're inviting me to join their school when I'm basically just like relative nobody at this point in history. Now this is Canto 5 of Inferno, the famous story of Francesca da Rimini and Paolo Malatesta. This has been told so many times throughout the centuries, and like in artwork and music and even on figure skating programs. And I did do a previous video fairly recently about the famous Rodin sculpture, The Kiss, which was based on this episode. And we see like they're being blown around by the whirlwind to symbolize their passions. And this is an example of contrapasso, like that what you did in life, like in purgatory or in hell, you're perpetually reminded of in your punishment or your penance. And here we see the 2 lovers being slain by the husband of Francesca. Unfortunately, this still happens many times. He was like totally got off scot-free. He didn't have any consequences at all. He even became like podesta for many times in his city. Like even like today, unfortunately, many so-called men, they're excused for murdering their wives and girlfriends. The judge will say, oh, he was just under a lot of stress, or can you blame him? He felt betrayed, or he had a moment of temporary insanity, or even though like the so-called like rough sex gone wrong defense, which is like beyond freaking creepy, but that's like a subject for another thing. And anyway, at the end of the story, Dante is so moved, like he faints yet again. Now here we see Cerberus, a 3-headed dog at the entrance of the 3rd circle of hell in Canto 6, which is home to the gluttons, and Virgil has to distract him, so he puts some freezing mud in this dog's mouth so they can like kind of get past him. And then this next picture we see, this is new to me again, not one of the ones I was aware of originally, when they're in Canto 8 and they're like going across the river, and Filippo Argenti, who is an enemy of Dante's in real life, like comes up and tries to overturn the boat, and Dante quarrels with him, and like Virgil praises him for being angry. It's just like totally like the opposite of what Virgil is. Usually he's like, how dare you listen to this vulgar talk or start like trying to get violent with people. You have to rise to your better nature. And this is the famous episode outside the gates of the city of Dis, and also Canto 8 and into Canto 9, where there are all these devils threatening Dante and Virgil, and like Virgil fails for the first time. He can't figure out how to get past them, or like how to like find a gate into the city, and there's like a Medusa, like a Gorgon, like threatening to turn anyone who looks at her into stone. And like Virgil says, don't look, my son, and like Dante closes his eyes, and in addition to that, Virgil puts his hands over Dante's eyes, like just to be as safe as possible. And then finally an angel comes like with a little wand, just like, get away from here, all you like annoying, like stupid little devils. And he just like, opens the gates like so easily. And I like, later on in the poem, I think it's Canto 12, Dante reminds Virgil of his failure. He like throws shade at him. He's like, oh, my master, you who overcome all opposition, except that one time those tough demons came to meet us outside the gates of the city of Dis. Here we see the heretics in the flaming tombs and some Farinata rising out of his tomb, and the father of Guido Cavalcante next to him, who was Dante's best friend, the son, not the father in real life, or at least until they had an acrimonious falling out. And then there's Dante and Virgil are being like ferried across another river by a centaur in the next one. This is a Wood of the Suicides in the 13th canto in the 7th Circle of Hell. This is for people who have been violent against themselves. Unfortunately, like people didn't understand a lot about suicide at the time. I did a previous video about this called basically like the Wood of the Suicides, and it was mostly all about the canto as well, but like inspired by the William Blake artwork about this canto, which I originally did for my blogging from A to Z April in 2021 when my theme was Dante and the Divine Comedy. And if you're interested, you can check out that video. It's in my playlist of all about Dante and the Divine Comedy, and there are a bunch of resources I put at the end in case anyone is like, God forbid, they or loved ones or such are like just thinking about doing the unthinkable, because there's always a way out of this endless night. You don't have to be like Piero della Vigna, who unfortunately, like, according to the legend at least, he took his own life. Like, although some historians believe he may not have really committed suicide, that was just like made up to try to discredit him and such. But this is Dante and Virgil being ferried down to the 8th circle of hell by Geryon, this like really like famous beast with he's like all composed of parts of all sorts of different animals and humans and such. I've heard some people pronouncing it Geryon, but because the name is Greek in origin, I presume it has a hard G, so Geryon, but I guess like, whatever pronunciation you're used to. And this is another thing where like Dante talks about, he feels so faint, like right before he boards Geryon, and like when they're like floating or flying down to the next circle, he just feels like, I'm like almost passing out or like coming back to myself. That's another clue that he might have had like epilepsy or something similar, or he had like seizures or fainting spells a lot. Here we see Canto 25 with Aniel the thief being turned into a snake, and I've seen it pointed out by several Dante scholars. This is the closest Inferno comes to any kind of sexualized torture, and I think it's kind of funny. I mentioned this in a prior video. Like Dante isn't shy about using like coarse or vulgar language in Inferno. I mean, obviously it's not, he's not constantly shooting off like horrible language or anything like that. He doesn't even use F-bombs or anything like that, but he's not shy about using coarse language when it's called for. The lower and lower he gets down into hell, and so like it's kind of like weird and like just like funny or ironic or hypocritical or whatever. He uses the term the member man conceals instead of using like a more pornographic word when Aniel is being turned into a snake. This is the famous episode with Ulysses, Odysseus. He's in a twin flame, and he's telling his story, or at least the story Dante imagines about his final voyage. This is in the 8th circle of hell for the sowers of discord, and this is the poet Bertrand de Born. He's lifting up his head. This is also in the 1911, or the longer of the two 1911 films called L'Inferno. That's like kind of gruesome and creepy. That's one of the things that absolutely triggers me. One of the few things that legitimately triggers me in a movie, seeing someone like having a decapitated head, or like a decapitated head like all by itself. And so like Dante felt he was like a sower of discord because he had like family disharmony. It wasn't like necessarily taken literally, as I think I explained this in more detail in my video I did previously on Contrapasso. And this is like a very, very difficult episode, but for many, many reasons. And I know it's untranslated out, completely left out in many like Arabic editions of the Commedia, with Prophet Muhammad is ripping out his like insides and stuff. Dante falsely believed, as did like pretty much everyone at that time, that Prophet Muhammad was originally a Nestorian Christian and therefore like a schismatic. And so like he didn't realize like Prophet Muhammad was never Christian to begin with and founded a new religion and had like nothing to do with Christianity or like schismatism or whatever. So like unfortunately that's just one of like, not, I wouldn't say many, but like a number of things he genuinely believed because they just didn't have like access to information, saying this is like an urban myth or like something people like began because of a bad translation, or like people took something out of context or didn't understand it or whatever, and it just like grew into like established historical fact, like saying Cleopatra was like this like wanton woman who was constantly like sex on the brain instead of like a wonderful like capable female ruler and such, like, or like for saying like Pope Anastasius was a heretic. That's also like false, and that he believed the donation of Constantine, just a few things here and there like that, but most of the things he believed, like he just couldn't help it because that was just what was considered like established history at the time. And this is Inferno 31, one, the giant Antaeus carries Virgil and Dante to the ninth circle of hell, and this is like where all these giants are like lurking about, and Dante is really like scared to see them. Now we see one of the pictures of the famous episode of Count Ugolino. Like Pinelli did a number of like drawings of this, but this is where he's like starving to death in the tower with his sons and his grandsons. This is a very, very famous episode, and I also have a blog post about Count Ugolino. Maybe I can turn that into a video in future, but there are some people who believe like he didn't really commit cannibalism, like because of like so-called like forensic evidence, but some people believe like, yeah, maybe he really was, and the jury's out on that. I can discuss that in future in more detail in that video, but that's one of the more famous episodes of Inferno. I think that might have been the first one I knew about in my Spanish class, and my first year of community college. I believe, I don't remember why we were like studying Inferno written in like Spanish or just a little bit of it. Like this was like such a gruesome image, just like guys like chewing on this other guy's head. It's like how can you ever forget that? And like when I saw that in the L'Inferno films, like I basically knew that was Ugolino the first time I saw it. I didn't need even an intertitle to know what was going on and who that was. Now this is Dante and Virgil climbing out of hell, like down the body of the three-headed Lucifer. You know, no matter how many times I've read this particular section of the poem or listened to people explaining it, I just can't really picture it in my mind. Like they're climbing down and suddenly they make a turn and they're climbing up again, and that is supposed to make sense with they're not like changing. It just like makes me feel confused even thinking about it. Maybe I will eventually like figure it out if I actually like, see diagrams or like demonstrations or whatever. This is an end of Inferno, Canto 34, when Virgil and Dante are like finally climbing out of hell. You can see Satan's feet sticking up in the back, and they finally behold again stars. You know, so many people who like DNF the book after Inferno, they're like missing out on so much. I can understand obviously like the drawings of Inferno and the stories, even if you don't look at the artwork, they're like undeniably so fun and dramatic, and like they're more memorable. Like you can remember like based on, oh, this story or like event or whatever like happens in this canto. It's a little bit harder with Purgatorio and Paradiso, not that they're not memorable in their own way, but it's just like a lot harder, well, maybe for me at least, to like, you know, off the top of my head, like instantly match up, oh, this person that shows up in this canto, or like this like important event or whatever happens, because it gets like, you know, a little more esoteric and philosophical and religious. But you know, like Inferno is like just so fun, but Dante did not want his readers to stay in hell or end on a low, sad, hopeless note. He wants to take us all into the heights of paradise with him and, you know, learn all these important lessons. And this is a frontispiece of Purgatorio, which is my favorite of the three canticles. There's just like so much beauty and emotion and drama in it, even if it is like nothing can really live up to like the fun of Inferno. But like Purgatorio, I love it just because it's like, again, as I just mentioned, like just emotional, like dramatic, just so many wonderful like things happening, like lessons to be learned, and just like Virgil like starts coming apart as a character. He like unravels, starts failing more and more, like he makes mistakes and doesn't know what to do, and like meanwhile like Dante is like progressing more and more in his spiritual development, and just like so many things. These next two images are from Canto 1 of Purgatorio, when Cato, who is the groundskeeper, I guess, or like the guardian of the gates of Purgatory, he sees these two guys and he's like, what's going on? Did you just escape from hell? Have the eternal decrees of heaven suddenly been reversed? Like Virgil tells him, this man has not yet seen his final hour, but so close to it his folly brought him that little time was left to change his ways. And it's like that's really seems to suggest like Dante may have been like, God forbid, like suicidal or even attempted suicide at this or at some point in his life. So he wasn't just like, you know, being imaginative or fictional. This is like a beautiful scene to me, like at the end of Canto 1 of Purgatorio, where Virgil is washing Dante of all the soot on his face, because he's obviously gotten really dirty after the 24 hours going through hell without like any like bathroom breaks or a chance to wash himself or eat or drink. And then he like pulls up a reed to replace the belt Dante was wearing around his waist, and like threw down at one point in their journey. Like it's a miracle, another reed grows up immediately after Virgil pulls that reed. This is the beautiful episode of Canto 2 of Purgatorio, where there's a beautiful light enshrouded boat full of newly deceased souls like approaching the shores of Mount Purgatory with an angel in it. Like a number of artists have depicted this over the years. That's just like such a beautiful thing after all the like the drama and pain and despair and hopelessness of hell. Finally there's like a beautiful beacon of hope like coming up, even if like it's going to take a long time for most of these souls to like, you know, reach their spiritual perfection and be granted entrance into Paradiso. And I just thought this was like too cool and like fun and macabre not to include it in my own collection. This like skull eating people, like, you know, that's just after my own like macabre Halloween loving heart. This is Canto 9 of Purgatorio, when Virgil is telling Dante how he like rose up to the entrance of Purgatory proper, like as Saint Lucia came to him when he was sleeping and like, you know, just like lifted him up and flew him with her. That was one of his special saints, and some people feel that might have been because like one of the things, she's like the patron saint of his eyesight, and Dante presumably had like really poor eyesight from like squinting at books all day, particularly before we had, you know, like electrical or even gas lighting. So like his eyes were deteriorating the more and more he was like spending all his time writing and reading. This is still Canto 9 of Purgatorio, when Dante and Virgil are at the gates to the entrance of Purgatory proper, and an angel greets them and gives them some keys. One of which is for the gate to enter into it, and I'm so used to thinking of angels as she because of modern like visuals and such, but traditionally like angels were pretty much like exclusively thought of as male, and so this angel like tells him like, don't look behind you or you'll like have to like leave purgatory and like go start all over again and like disrupt your spiritual progress. And like there are 3 different like steps leading up to the entrance gates, like each color represents a different like stage of repentance and forgiveness. And the angel also writes 7 P's on Dante's forehead with the sword, standing for peccata, the Latin word for sin. And like at the end of like each terrace of purgatory, an angel like gently like erases another P from Dante's forehead as he progresses through like being cured of sins. This is just Dante, Virgil, and Statius, who was Dante's second favorite writer, the great poet of like Rome's the Latin literature, Silver Age. They're sleeping on the steps. Like this is something different about purgatory from hell. Dante dreams like not once but actually 3 times, so he actually has a chance to like, you know, rest and relax instead of just like constantly going down and being low. He has a chance to like, you know, regroup himself. And this is a grand pageant of history that Dante sees very, very late in purgatory, after he's like, you know, finished all his trials and gone through like the wall of fire into the Garden of Eden. He absolutely like loved history and politics, so this was like, he must have absolutely loved writing this, like seeing like all like history and religion, or at least as he knew it in his part of the world, like unfolding right in front of him. This is Canto 30 of Purgatorio, where Beatrice and Dante finally have a reunion, and like, you know, instead of you would think like this was his like lost love, his absolute like, you know, immaculate dream, his long lost like dream girl whom he was so passionately in love with since he was like a boy, not even 10 years old yet. It would be all like, oh honey, oh sweetheart, I'm so happy to see you, let me hug and kiss you, and you know, all this and that. And like instead she like immediately starts upbraiding him, and like he's like, you know, overcome with sorrow because Virgil has just left him, and she's like saying like, don't cry yet, boy, I'm about to give you something to really cry about. From another sword you must weep first. And she starts taking him to task for all his like sins and forgetting her, and like, you know, chasing after like other women, and like just pursuing like so-called like heretical philosophies and such like that. And he's so overcome with shame and remorse he can't even look her in the face. And then this other woman, Matilda, who's been helping him from before Beatrice arrived on the scene when they were all in the Garden of Eden together, she like, you know, cleansed him in the rivers, and she tells him like in the Italian original, tiem me, hold me, as she's like, you know, dunking him under the water in case like he should like, God forbid, like lose his footing and like, you know, drowned under the water. So like he has to hold on to her while she's like cleansing him of his sins, like helping him to forget the recent past and just like be totally wiped clean. This is another grand pageant at the end of Purgatorio with like so much rich symbolism, you know, like these like the great whore of Babylon or whatever, and this like, you know, eagle, I'm sorry, not the eagle, the griffith, the eagle comes later, and Paradiso, and like a lion, and all these like grand, like, you know, glorious like illustrative things in this pageant. And eventually like the chariot is destroyed. It's like, you know, like representative of like sin and what Dante believed was corrupting people at the time. And this is the very end of Purgatorio, Canto 33, when Beatrice is telling him, come on with me, all you guys, like, oh, and she says to Statius with queenly modesty, and you come too, although like after this point, like Statius never appears again. We don't even like see what happens to him in like Canto 1 of Paradiso. So I'm like just curious like why Dante just like dropped him without like a second thought or whatever, just felt it wasn't important to include him. And so basically like they're at the gates between like, you know, purgatory and paradise. So like basically it's starting another exciting chapter in his spiritual progression. These are from the first 3 cantos of Paradiso. You can kind of see like Dante is so in awe of Beatrice. He's not really like spiritually like sure of himself yet. Like, oh, you're my guide, my mistress, my teacher. You have to like tell me what to do because I've never been in this like part of like, you know, the universe, or like I know it's like not really technically the universe. It's a place beyond time and space. And so he's like looking to her for guidance, and she's like basically trying to be the teacher. And you can see he's still like from his expressions like he's totally in awe of her, like believing everything she says to him. He just like needs to like get his spiritual footing as he starts rising higher and higher, and like kind of looking to her for comfort and like, you know, seeing like spiritual like intellect. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the word, like edification. I think that might be the word, like through her eyes. These are some images from a bit later in Paradiso with, like the symbolism of the eagle and the lion and the stars. Like particularly the eagle is a famous episode of Paradiso. Like many people over the years have wondered like what the eagle and the letters in it exactly stand for. Like one of the people who interpreted it was like Mussolini. He believed like he was the great like master being foretold in the eagle and the numbers, but he really wasn't. As you can see, as Dante progresses throughout Paradise, like the spirituality and like the spiritual figures he encounters become just like more and more intense as he's learning more lessons, and he's becoming like more sure of himself, and he can like answer his like final exam with the great saints about like what is like love, like hope and faith and charity. And so he's not just always looking for Beatrice for like guidance and such, even though he still like looks to her, but he's like feeling like stronger and stronger and more sure of himself, and he doesn't need her for everything. And unfortunately many people feel like Paradiso isn't a canticle they should really like or read or such, because it's like so like heavy and dense and like full of spiritual stuff and philosophical, and it's not like easily accessible like hell, or even Purgatorio is a lot more like relatively more accessible than Paradiso, because it like deals with like human drama and such like that. It's not like intensely like 100% spiritual, but like you just have to have a good teacher or a guidebook to study with, and you'll hopefully like have a much like better experience and understanding of it. This is when Dante and Beatrice are entering into Empyrean, which is like a place beyond time and space, like above all the different circles of the heavens, and it's just like such an intense experience for Dante. And this is Canto 31 of Paradiso with the Virgin Mary, the woman who set Dante's entire journey in motion from the very beginning. If you remember back to Canto 2 of Inferno, when she was the one who summoned Beatrice, and they and Saint Lucia got together and had a conference to try to save this wayward soul. And there's this absolutely beautiful prayer to Mary, who is which is said by Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, who you're seeing in this image, who becomes Dante's final guide on the journey. Many people like they don't realize, or maybe they don't remember, like Beatrice isn't the final guide. It's actually Saint Bernard. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux is very prominent in medieval Mariology and like really helping to elevate into a level it hadn't been prior. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this image gallery and that you are inspired to check out more of Bartolomeo Pinelli's artwork. Again, I'm really leaving a description down below. It's like really so wonderful. I really hope someday I can find an edition of the Commedia which features his illustrations, because it would be just wonderful to have them in a physical copy instead of just looking on them online. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and hitting the notifications button. I particularly like seeing comments from you guys, and particularly for this video, because I've spent so much time working on it, like gathering the images and like preparing the video and just like all the editing I'll be doing after I finish this up. So really would like appreciate it if I would see comments from you guys, like letting me know you watched all the way through and that you like the images, or just like whatever your thoughts might be. And thank you guys again very much for watching. I will see you soon. Thanks again. Bye.